I walked out of work, and my stomach dropped straight to my feet. The parking spot where my car, my newly paid-off 2023 Camry, should have been gleaming was completely, terrifyingly empty. My first call was to my mom, a frantic whisper of panic. Her response was a chilling calm. "Oh, honey, relax. We gave it to Elena. She needs it more." That's when something inside me snapped. My name is Olivia. I'm 30 years old, a software engineer living in Denver, Colorado. That Thursday was supposed to be just another normal day. Late meetings, cold coffee, the quiet satisfaction of heading home after a long grind. But the moment I stepped into the parking lot, a cold dread snaked around my heart. My eyes darted to the familiar space, the spot where my silver Camry always waited, a small reward for years of relentless work. It was gone. My heart began to pound a frantic drum against my ribs. I checked the road twice, then a third time, desperate to believe I'd just forgotten where I parked. But no, my car, the one I'd just made the final payment on last month, was undeniably, terrifyingly gone. I froze, the crisp autumn air suddenly slicing through my chest. With trembling fingers, I pulled out my phone and called my mother. "Mom, my car's missing. Did someone tow it?" Her voice, infuriatingly serene, cut through my panic. "Oh, honey, relax. We gave it to Elena. She needs it more than you do. She just lost hers last week." For a second, the world tilted. The blood roared in my ears. "You what?" I whispered, the words barely escaping. "You gave my car to Elena? She has a new job, sweetheart. Don't make a scene." That's when the fragile dam inside me shattered. My voice was steady, a stark contrast to the earthquake shaking my entire body. "That car," I said, each word a shard of glass, "was the first thing I ever owned outright. I worked for it, paid for it, protected it. And you call it sharing?" I hung up before I could say something truly irreparable. Then, with a chilling resolve, I dialed 911. "Tell me where you're watching from and what time is right now. Because this one will make you question what family truly means." Growing up, I learned early that in my family, love always came with conditions, and fairness was definitely not one of them. I was the oldest, the one who always figured things out, who never asked for much because I knew it wouldn't come anyway. By 18, I was juggling 2 part-time jobs while studying computer science, hoarding every dollar I earned. My parents, they called it good practice for the real world. But when Elena turned 18, they showered her with surprises, a brand new MacBook, a fancy camera, and a gap year trip to Europe. "She needs to find her inspiration," Mom would say. I'd found my inspiration too, just not in Italy. Mine came at 3 a.m. in a library cubicle, surrounded by empty coffee cups and the hum of ancient computers, wondering why effort never earned the same applause as chaos. Elena was always the golden child. Even at 27, she still lived at home. She'd bounced between 3 jobs in 2 years, constantly finding herself between yoga retreats and online art classes she never finished. Each time she stumbled, my parents would rush in, cushioning her fall, blaming bad management, toxic workplaces, or jealous coworkers. The truth was far simpler. Elena never learned to stand on her own because they never let her truly fall. I watched from a distance, a cocktail of pity and resentment churning inside me. Every time she failed, they'd dip into their savings, rescuing her, while I was still budgeting groceries by the cent, paying off my student loans one painful installment at a time. I remember one night vividly. I was 19, sitting on my bedroom floor, counting tips from my cafe shift, trying to decide if I could afford a used laptop for class. My mom knocked, then floated in, a triumphant smile on her face, holding a sleek white box. "Isn't it great?" she beamed, setting the new MacBook on Elena's bed. "Your sister needs it for her group projects." I just nodded, pretending I didn't care. But I remember the crushing weight in my chest when I opened my own secondhand laptop the next morning, its fan wheezing like it was apologizing for existing. That was the moment I realized it. In my family, effort wasn't admirable. It was invisible. By the time I graduated, I'd stopped expecting fairness. I landed a tech job in Denver, moved out, and made a silent vow to myself. I would never ask them for help again. The freedom was lonely at first, a vast, echoing space, but it was fiercely, entirely mine. I paid my rent, filed my own taxes, cooked meals for one, and discovered the quiet, profound joy of earning without owing. The years blurred into a rhythm. Work, save, survive, repeat. Then, after 6 long, grinding years, I did something monumental. I bought a car. Not a hand-me-down, not a clunker from a cousin, but my car. A 2023 silver Camry, reliable, modest, but brand new. I made the down payment with shaking hands and spent months watching that loan balance shrink. Each payment was a small victory, proof that independence could be built one stubborn decision at a time. Whenever I drove home to visit, my parents would eye it like some shiny mistake. "You should have let your dad co-sign," Mom would scold. "It's dangerous for a woman alone to manage loans." I'd smile politely, gripping my keys tighter, refusing to engage. Elena, meanwhile, had managed to total 3 cars. One from texting while driving, another after a night of celebrating. Each time, my parents replaced it within weeks. "She's just unlucky," Dad had said once. I remember looking at the photo of her crumpled Honda, the front mashed like paper, and wondering how anyone could be that unlucky 3 times in 5 years. But in our family, bad decisions were just another opportunity for Elena to be rescued. The irony was almost poetic. The responsible one, the steady one, the one they never had to worry about, had become invisible by design. Because I didn't need saving, I didn't deserve attention. They assumed I had enough. And in their warped world, enough was the same as too much. So I stopped sharing, stopped explaining my achievements. When I got promoted, I didn't tell them. When I hit my savings goal, I celebrated alone with takeout sushi. It was easier that way. I learned to carry my pride quietly, like a secret they couldn't take from me, until the day they did. That afternoon, standing in the empty parking lot, hearing my mother's casual tone through the phone, a gut-wrenching truth hit me. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. This was the final chapter in a story that had started long ago. A story of taking, excusing, and expecting me to stay silent. They hadn't stolen my car out of malice. They'd done out of habit, because in their eyes, what was mine was always theirs to redistribute. They never understood the weight of independence, the trembling pride of signing your own check, the quiet relief of paying off your first debt. They didn't know what it meant to earn something and fear losing it. But they were experts at one thing, pulling me down every time Elena fell. And as I stood there in that cold parking lot, listening to the dial tone after hanging up on my mother, a single, crystal-clear thought settled in my mind. They don't know what it feels like to stand on their own 2 feet because they've spent their whole lives standing on mine. The phone felt impossibly heavy in my hand as I pressed 911. My voice shook, but I forced the words out, clear and firm. "I'd like to report a stolen vehicle." There was a brief, disorienting pause, the calm tone of the dispatcher a sharp contrast to my inner turmoil. "Can you describe a vehicle, ma'am?" I swallowed hard. "A silver 2023 Toyota Camry. Colorado plates, registered under my name, Olivia Reyes." My reflection in the office window looked strange, like someone else was speaking through me. "When did you last see the vehicle?" "This morning, around 8 a.m., I said, glancing at the empty spot again as if my car might magically reappear. "And do you know who might have taken it?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I took a breath that burned on the way out. "My parents. They gave it to my sister, Elena, without my permission." Silence. The kind that makes you wonder if you've just confessed to something unspeakable. Finally, the dispatcher said softly, "You believe your family took your car without consent." "Not believe," I corrected, my voice gaining strength. "I know. My mother told me." Another pause. "Understood, Miss Reyes. Please stay where you are. I'm sending an officer to take your statement." 20 minutes later, Officer Ruiz arrived. The sun had dipped behind the office towers, bathing the parking lot in a pale, orange glow. She stepped out of the patrol car, calm, collected, the kind of presence that makes chaos feel manageable. Her dark hair was tied back, her voice steady but kind. "Miss Reyes?" I nodded, clutching the folder I grabbed from my desk on instinct. "You reported a stolen vehicle." I handed her everything: title, registration, insurance, proof of payment, even the last loan statement stamp paid in full. All of this is under your name? She asked. Yes, completely mine. No co-signers, no shared ownership. She nodded, flipping through the papers with quiet precision. And you didn't give anyone permission to take it? No one, I said, my voice firmer now. They used a spare key I left with my parents for emergencies. I never said they could give it to someone else. Ruiz looked up, meeting my eyes. Do you know where your sister might be driving the vehicle? No idea, I said, a bitter laugh escaping. She could be anywhere, probably posting about her new gift on Instagram. Ruiz offered a small, sympathetic smile. Family theft cases are complicated, but they're still theft. Whether it's a stranger or a relative, the law doesn't make exceptions for feelings. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. The law doesn't make exceptions for feelings. I'd spent my entire life trapped in those exceptions. She's your sister. They're your parents. Family first. But now, staring at the empty parking space that had once held the shining symbol of my independence, I realized those excuses were just another way of saying, you don't matter. Ruiz took a few photos of the spot, noted the security camera above the lot, and spoke in her radio. Dispatch, run a bolo for a silver 2023 Toyota Camry. License plate CL 4-2078, registered to Olivia Reyes, Denver County. Possible suspect driving, Elena Reyes. Her voice was steady, official. Hearing my sister's name in that context made my stomach twist. We'll check nearby traffic cameras, she said, turning back to me. If your sister's out driving it, we'll find it. I can't believe this is real, I whispered. My parents, they just gave it away. Ruiz tucked her notepad into her jacket. You'd be surprised how often family members assume ownership over someone else's property. It's not about need, it's about entitlement. I exhaled shakily, eyes burning. I always thought only strangers could betray you. She studied me for a moment, her voice lowering. Sometimes it's easier for strangers to be honest, Miss Reyes. Family expects forgiveness before they even say sorry. The streetlights flickered on, painting long shadows across the pavement. Ruiz handed me a card. Here's your case number. Keep it safe. If your sister or parents contact you, don't engage. Just document everything. We'll handle the rest. I nodded, my hands trembling as I tucked the card into my wallet. She paused before getting into her patrol car. You did the right thing, you know. I almost laughed. It doesn't feel like it. Ruiz gave a faint smile. Doing the right thing rarely does at first. But trust me, this isn't about the car anymore. It's about respect, and you're owed that. As she drove off, the flashing red and blue lights fading down the street, I was left alone with the quiet hum of distant traffic. I sank onto the curb, staring at the dark space where my car used to be. The asphalt still carried faint tire marks, a ghost of what was mine. I thought of my parents' voices, calm and dismissive, of Elena's careless laughter, of every time I'd been told to be understanding. But for the first time, I wasn't going to understand. I wasn't going to shrink or rationalize or let it slide. I would make them face what they'd done, not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood something crucial. Forgiveness means nothing without accountability. I looked up at the streetlight flickering above me, the case card still warm in my hand, and whispered into the night, "You don't get to take from me anymore." Then I stood, brushed the dust from my skirt, and walked back toward the building. I wasn't the same woman who'd parked here this morning. The line had been crossed, and this time, I wasn't going to erase it. I stared at the quiet screen of my phone for almost a full minute after Officer Ruiz drove away. The city lights shimmered on the hood of a stranger's car nearby, and for a fleeting second, I thought about pretending none of this had happened. Going home, letting it go, convincing myself it wasn't worth the fight. But the thought of Elena behind my steering wheel, laughing, maybe even bragging about her new car, burned through my chest like acid. My thumb hovered, then pressed call mom. She picked up on the second ring, her voice already sharpened with that mix of impatience and guilt she used when she knew she was wrong, but refused to admit it. "Olivia, have you calmed down yet?" "No, Mom," I said evenly. "I just called the police. I reported my car stolen, and I'm following through." A beat of stunned silence. Then her tone cracked into panic. "What? Olivia?" "No, Don't be ridiculous. You called the police on your own family? You're going to destroy us over this. I clenched my jaw, the anger rising, slow and steady. I'm not destroying anything, Mom. This family destroyed itself the moment it decided theft was an act of love. In the background, I could hear the TV, the muffled clatter of dishes, and my father's voice asking, "What's going on?" She must have handed him the phone because the next thing I heard was his low, measured tone, the one he used when pretending to be the reasonable one. "Olivia, listen to me. You're overreacting. Elena needed a car for her new job. Before or after you took it?" He exhaled long and slow. "We didn't take it. We borrowed it. It's still in the family. You get it back." I laughed then, a short, hollow sound that surprised even me. "You've said that before. About my savings you used for Elena's tuition. About the furniture I left when I moved out. About the laptop you gave her because she needed it for work. I never saw any of it again. So no, Dad, I won't be getting this back. Not this time." He sighed, as if I was the one exhausting him. "She's your sister, Olivia. She's trying to get her life together. You could take the bus for a few days. You're stronger. You'll manage." There it was. The script I'd heard all my life. You're stronger. It always sounded like a compliment until I realized it was just permission for them to keep taking. "You spent my entire life rewarding her failures and punishing my stability," I said quietly. "Every time she burned something down, you hand her something of mine to rebuild it with. But this was mine, Dad. My name, my money, my effort." He cut in sharply. "Don't talk to me like that. You're being selfish. Family helps family." "Then tell me," I said, my voice trembling but steady, "who helps me?" For a moment, the line went completely silent. Then Mom jumped back in, her voice brittle. "If you don't drop this report, your sister could be arrested. Is that what you want? To put your own blood in jail?" "No, Mom. What I want is for my family to understand that consequences exist. If Elena is old enough to drive, she's old enough to face what comes next." "God, listen to yourself. You sound heartless." "Maybe I am," I said. "Maybe years of being treated like a backup plan have turned me into someone who finally stopped bleeding for everyone else." I could hear her sniff, her voice softening into a practiced guilt. "Olivia, please don't do this. We'll talk to Elena. We'll fix it. Then fix it by calling her and telling her to return my car. Otherwise, the police will." I waited, but she couldn't promise that. "You wouldn't really," she started, but I hung up. The quiet that followed was almost physical, pressing against my chest. Within minutes, my phone began vibrating nonstop. Unknown numbers, cousins, aunts, even Grandma's landline flashing across the screen. 14 missed calls in under an hour. I scrolled through the voicemails mechanically. "Nat, it's Aunt Lydia. Honey, you don't call the cops on your sister, okay? Family's family." Another. "This is Marcus. Look, Elena messed up, but come on, jail. Drop it before it gets out of hand." And another. "Your mom's beside herself. You're better than this. Family helps family." Every single one of them said the same thing. The same poisonous mantra I'd grown up hearing. Not one person asked if I was safe. Not one asked how I get to work tomorrow, or if I was okay. Outside, Denver's skyline blinked in the distance, indifferent and cold. I closed my eyes, letting the anger settle into something colder, sharper, a kind of clarity. For the first time, I understood that their version of love had never been about family. It was about control, and I was done playing along. The Uber driver didn't say a word the whole ride home. Maybe it was the way I was clutching my phone, or the tear streaks still drying on my cheeks. Denver streets blurred past the window in long ribbons of color. Headlights, traffic lights, neon signs, each one reflecting against the glass like a life I wasn't part of. I tried to breathe evenly, but every exhale came out shaky, uneven, like my body didn't know what calm was anymore. My car wasn't just transportation. It was proof that I'd built something for myself, something no one could take. And yet they had. The city lights flickered on my reflection, mascara smudged, eyes swollen, jaw tight. I barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked smaller than I remembered, like all the years of staying composed had collapsed in a single day. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't look. I couldn't. Every vibration felt like a tiny echo of all the times I'd been told to understand, to be patient, to not overreact. For once, I didn't want to understand. I wanted to feel. As the car pulled onto my street, a memory surfaced, sharp and cruel in its clarity. I was 18, standing outside our old house in the rain, backpack soaked through, clutching a half-broken umbrella. My bike, the one I'd saved for months to buy, was gone. I remembered the panic, the desperate search, until I found it 2 days later, lying in the mud behind Elena's friend's house. The chain rusted, the seat torn. She'd borrowed it, of course. Just for a few hours, she'd said. I didn't think you'd mind. When I tried to tell our parents, Mom waved it off. She's your sister. Don't be dramatic. You can clean it. So I did. I cleaned it in silence, scrubbing until my hands bled, watching the rain wash over the scratches she'd left. That was the first time I learned what theft looked like in our family. It wasn't about stealing things. It was about stealing boundaries and pretending it was love. The memory hit me so hard I almost missed the driver saying, "We're here." I blinked, forcing a smile, handed him a tip, and stepped out into the cold night. The rain had started again, a thin drizzle that coated the street in silver. My apartment building loomed ahead, quiet, still anonymous. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. Inside, the air felt too still, too sharp. I sank onto the couch without turning on the lights. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from exhaustion, the kind that lives in your bones after years of pretending you're fine. I tried to tell myself it was just a car, that I could get another one, that it wasn't worth this ache in my chest. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about the car. It was about every time I've been told my feelings didn't matter. About every time they'd taken something, my time, my effort, my peace, and expected gratitude in return. The tears came slowly at first, quiet and tired, until they weren't quiet anymore. They came like the rain outside, steady, relentless, cleansing. I cried for the girl who had scrubbed mud off her bike in silence. For the woman who kept forgiving people who never apologized. For the daughter who thought that being good would one day earn her respect. It hadn't. When the sobs finally faded, I pulled myself up, grabbed a notebook from my desk, and sat by the window. The city outside was soft now, blurred by the drizzle and the faint hum of midnight traffic. I opened the notebook to a blank page and wrote slowly, my hands still shaking, May 14th. Today I lost my car. But maybe today is the day I found myself again. The words looked small and fragile on the paper, but they felt real, more real than anything I'd heard from my family in years. I stared at them for a long time, the ink spreading slightly where a tear had fallen. Then I closed the notebook gently, like sealing a promise I wasn't ready to break. I moved to the kitchen, made tea just for something to do. The kettle's whistle sounded too loud in the quiet. I leaned against the counter, watching steam curl upward, and whispered to no one, "This isn't the first time they've taken from me. It's just the first time I refuse to stay quiet." The truth of that sentence settled deep in my chest, steady, solid, almost comforting. It wasn't anger anymore. It was awareness. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't crazy. I was simply done. Outside, a car passed, headlights sweeping across the living room wall, then disappearing. I thought of Elena driving my Camry, her hands on the same steering wheel I'd gripped every morning with pride. I wondered if she even felt a twinge of guilt, or if she'd already convinced herself she deserved it. Either way, it didn't matter. For once, it wasn't my job to fix it. I carried my mug to the couch and curled up under a blanket, the notebook resting on my lap. The rain had stopped. The city was quiet again. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, a faint, lonely sound swallowed by the night. I closed my eyes, breathing slowly. For the first time in years, the silence didn't scare me. It felt like something else, something that could almost be called peace. The call came the next afternoon while I was at my desk, staring blankly at lines of code that refused to make sense. My phone buzzed, and the name Officer Ruiz lit up the screen. For a second, I thought about letting it ring. I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever came next. But something in me, something steadier now, answered. Ms. Reyes. Her tone was calm, professional. We located your vehicle. I straightened in my chair, heart thudding. You did? Yes. Your sister was stopped earlier this morning for speeding near Aurora. The officer ran the plates. Your report came up immediately. The car has been impounded as evidence. You can retrieve it once processing is complete. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Is she okay? She's fine, Ruiz said. Then, after a pause, your parents have been calling the station since it happened. They wanted us to cancel the case. Her voice carried a faint edge of irony. But it doesn't work like that. Once a report is filed and probable cause confirmed, it becomes a criminal investigation. She's been taken in for questioning. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. The reality of it all pressed against me. My family's chaos now written into police logs, case numbers, official paperwork. There was no undoing this. And yet, deep down, I felt something that almost resembled relief. Thank you, I finally said, for treating it seriously. Ruiz's tone softened. It's what we're here for. You'd be surprised how many people don't think family theft counts. It does. After hanging up, I sat in silence, the hum of computers around me suddenly distant. My coworkers' conversations blurred into background noise. A tiny voice inside whispered, "It's over." But another one asked, "At what cost?" That evening, I drove a rental to the impound lot on the outskirts of the city. The building was a squat warehouse, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. The clerk at the front desk handed me a clipboard, barely glancing up. "Camry, silver, right? Space 34. You'll find the keys inside. Just sign here." The concrete floor echoed as I walked down the rows of cars, damaged, dented, forgotten. And then I saw it. My car. My beautiful, once pristine silver Camry, sitting under a flickering fluorescent light. My chest tightened. I opened the door and froze. Fast food wrappers littered the floor. Empty energy drink cans rolled under the seats. The passenger side was smeared with makeup. The dashboard sticky from some spilled soda. The gas tank was nearly empty. My carefully folded emergency blanket was crumpled in the back. My glove compartment ransacked. I stood there for a long time, staring. There were no tears left, just a heavy sigh that came from somewhere deep. 8 hours, I whispered. She only needed 8 hours to turn something I cherished into a dump. Footsteps echoed behind me. It was Officer Ruiz, clipboard in hand. "Everything look okay?" I gave a small, humorless laugh. "Depends on your definition of okay." I gestured to the mess. "It's intact. That's enough, I guess." Ruiz nodded slowly, then leaned against the side of the car. "You know," she said quietly, "in my line of work, people assume the hardest thing is reporting strangers. But that's not true. The hardest cases are the ones like yours." I looked at her, puzzled. "Why?" "Because when a stranger steals from you, it's about loss," she said. "But when someone you love does it, it's about betrayal. And betrayal doesn't just take your belongings. It takes your trust. And trust, that's much harder to replace." Her words sank into me like stones dropped into still water. I wanted to disagree, to say it wasn't betrayal, that it was just a mistake, a misunderstanding. But I couldn't, because she was right. I closed the car door and leaned against the hood. I used to think being strong meant forgiving everything, keeping the peace. But maybe being strong is finally saying enough. Ruiz smiled faintly. "That's exactly what it means." We finished the paperwork in silence. She handed me the keys and wished me luck. As I slid into the driver's seat, the familiar smell of stale fries and gasoline hit me. It should have made me angry. Instead, it just made me tired. I started the engine. The hum sounded the same, steady and loyal, as if nothing had happened. The seat adjusted automatically to my saved position. A tiny reminder that this car still remembered me. Driving out of the lot, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw Elena's reflection there. Carefree, reckless, untouchable. But it was just me. Just a woman who'd finally stopped being her family's safety net. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, the sky was burning orange. The last light of day spilling across the windshield. I parked, shut off the engine, and sat there in the quiet. My hands rested on the steering wheel, the same one that had been stolen, dirted, returned. It wasn't perfect anymore. Neither was I, but it was mine again. And for the first time in years, that was enough. 3 days later, there was a knock on my door. A slow, deliberate rhythm that didn't sound like the usual delivery or a neighbor. When I looked through the peephole, my heart sank. Standing there, wrapped in her thick wool coat and clutching her small leather purse, was Grandma Sophia. 83 years old, sharp-eyed despite her age, and somehow still the only person in the family who could make me feel 12 again. I opened the door before she could knock again. "Grandma." She smiled faintly. "Can I come in, mija?" Her voice was gentle, but there was something weighted beneath it. The smell of her lavender perfume followed her as she stepped inside, setting her purse carefully on the table like she was preparing for a long talk. I offered her tea, though I already knew she hadn't come for tea. She took a seat on the couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap. For a moment, she just studied me. My tired face, the shadows under my eyes, the quiet defiance still clinging to my posture. Finally, she sighed. "Your mother told me everything." I stayed standing, crossing my arms. "I'm sure she did." "She's worried sick," Grandma said softly. "Your sister, too. Elena's a mess." I laughed. A small, bitter sound. "A mess?" "She stole my car, Grandma. My parents helped her do it. I don't think a mess quite covers it." Her eyes flicked toward the window, then back to me. "The police report. The court case." She hesitated. "Elena will have a criminal record. A real one. Do you understand what that means for her future?" I leaned back against the counter, the cool surface grounding me. "Yes, Grandma. It means she'll finally face the consequences of her actions." She looked at me long and hard, her voice trembling slightly. "Consequences can destroy a person, Natalie. Prison changes people. Shame follows them forever. You're not a cruel girl. Don't let this turn you into someone you're not." That word, cruel, landed like a stone in my stomach. I'd heard it so many times in the past few days that it had started to lose meaning. But hearing it from her hurt in a different way. "Cruel," I said quietly. "Do you know what's cruel, Grandma? Spending your whole life doing the right thing and being punished for it. Watching everyone else break things, lie, steal, and still get forgiven because they're fragile or lost." Grandma's gaze softened, but she didn't interrupt. I took a breath, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "When I was 18, Elena took my bike and left it out in the rain. They told me not to make a fuss. When I was 20, Mom used my savings to pay for Elena's tuition without even asking. When I bought my first car, Dad said I was showing off. And now they took what I worked 6 years for and gave it away like it was nothing. And I'm the one who's heartless because I finally said no." For a long time, she didn't say anything. The ticking clock filled the silence between us. Finally, she said quietly, "You've been holding that pain a long time." I turned away, my throat tightening. All I ever wanted was fairness. Not favoritism, not praise, just fairness. Grandma nodded slowly. "Fairness is a beautiful thing, mija. But life and family, they're rarely fair." I spun around, my voice sharper than I intended. "That's the excuse everyone uses, Grandma. That's how they get away with everything. Because family isn't fair, so when do I get to stop paying the price for their mistakes?" She flinched slightly, but didn't look away. "You think I don't understand, but I do. I raised your mother." I saw how she learned to hide her weaknesses behind that smile. She spoils Elena because she's trying to fix something inside herself. But Natalie, she leaned forward, her eyes suddenly fierce. "That doesn't mean you have to bleed for her redemption." Her words startled me into silence. For the first time that day, I felt seen, not by an officer, not by a friend, but by someone who had lived long enough to recognize cycles when she saw them. "I'm not asking you to forgive them," Grandma continued. "I'm asking you to think about what happens next. Anger can build walls. And sometimes those walls keep out the sunlight, too." My voice broke. "I'm not angry, Grandma. I'm tired. So tired. I've spent my whole life being the responsible one. And the only reward I get is blame. I do everything right. And they call me ungrateful. I draw a line, and they call me cruel." Her face softened, and she reached out, her frail hand covering mine. "Maybe they call you cruel because deep down you remind them of what they should have been. Maybe you're a mirror they can't stand to look into." I swallowed hard, tears blurring the edges of her face. Then why does it hurt so much to be right? She smiled sadly. Because doing what's right doesn't always feel good, mija. But one day it will feel clean. We sat there for a while. No raised voices, no arguments, just silence and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Her thumb brushed against my hand, a small, wordless comfort. When she finally stood to leave, she adjusted her scarf and looked at me the way she used to when I was a child, right before saying something that would linger for years. You think you've lost your family, she said softly. But maybe you're just finding the part of it that was truly yours all along, yourself. I followed her to the door, helping her with her coat. She paused in the doorway, her eyes glistening. Don't harden your heart completely, Natalie. Just make sure the next time you open it, it's for people who've earned it. After she left, the apartment felt both heavier and lighter. I sank onto the couch, staring at the empty teacup she'd left behind. Her words played in my head like a soft echo. Maybe you're the mirror they can't stand to look into. For the first time, I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting the truth of it settle inside me like a quiet, steady heartbeat. The courthouse smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper, like time itself had been trapped inside. The walls were lined with framed photographs of long-retired judges, all of them wearing the same expression, patient, detached, weary. I sat on the wooden bench outside courtroom 4B, palms pressed against my knees, trying to keep my breath steady. The clock on the wall ticked too loud, the kind of ticking that fills every silence until it feels unbearable. Behind me, I could hear my parents whispering in Spanish. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew the tone. Sharp, clipped, worried more about appearances than consequences. Elena sat between them, tapping her foot nervously against the floor, eyes on her phone, pretending not to hear them argue. The public defender leaned against the wall, scrolling through notes, probably thinking this was just another family drama case in a long list of them. When the clerk finally opened the door and called, "The state of Colorado versus Elena Reyes," my stomach turned cold. I rose to my feet, following the group inside. The air in the courtroom was colder than the hallway. The lights too bright. Every sound amplified. The shuffle of papers, the cough of a bailiff, the creak of old wood. The judge sat high above us, a woman in her 60s with short gray hair, eyes like steel polished by years of human disappointment. She looked at Elena, then down at the file before her. "Miss Reyes," she began evenly, "you've agreed to enter a plea today." Elena's voice came out small. "Yes, Your Honor." Her lawyer nodded, shuffling papers toward the bench. I stayed behind them, second row from the front, sitting perfectly still. My heart thudded in my chest, but outwardly I must have looked calm. Years of practice pretending to be unshakable had made me good at that. The judge took the statement, reading it briefly before handing it back. "Ms. Reyes, please read your written admission aloud for the record." Elena's fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper. Her eyes flicked toward our parents, then down again. For a long moment, she didn't speak. The silence stretched heavy until the judge cleared her throat. Finally, Elena began, her voice thin but clear. "I, Elena Reyes, admit that I took my sister's vehicle without permission on May 14th. I knew the car was not registered to me. I knew I didn't have permission to drive it. I took it anyway because I thought my sister would forgive me. I was wrong. What I did was theft. I'm sorry." Her voice cracked on the last two words. A single tear slid down her cheek, and I watched it, waiting to feel something, anger, pity, relief. But all I felt was exhaustion. The judge nodded once. "Thank you, Miss Reyes." She turned to the clerk. "Let the record reflect a guilty plea." Her gaze returned to Elena. "This court accepts your admission. You are sentenced to 6 months of probation, a 1-year suspension of her driver's license, and restitution to the victim in the amount of $847 for impound and processing fees. Failure to comply will result in immediate revocation of probation and a jail sentence." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. The sound seemed to echo through my spine. Across the aisle, my mother's hand shot out to clutch Elena's arm, whispering comfort. My father's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle in his cheek twitch. Elena nodded numbly as her attorney whispered instructions about signing papers and probation meetings. No one looked at me. When the judge dismissed the court, I stood up slowly, feeling every pair of eyes in the room on me. My parents turned first. My mother's gaze locked onto mine for a brief second, filled not with apology, but with something that looked like quiet accusation. My father didn't look at me at all. He simply guided Elena toward the exit, his arm protective around her shoulder. She followed obediently, head down, hair falling over her face like a curtain. They passed within arm's reach. I could have said her name. I could have asked her to stop, to say something, anything, but I didn't, because I already knew what would happen. She'd look at me with that same mixture of guilt and self-pity. And my mother would step in, saying, "Natalie, don't make things worse." So I stayed silent. The sound of their footsteps faded down the hallway, swallowed by the noise of other cases being called. State versus Andrews. State versus Miller. Just another day in court. When I finally stepped outside, the Denver sky was low and gray, the air thick with the smell of oncoming rain. Families huddled together under umbrellas, some crying, some relieved. I stood alone on the courthouse steps, watching them scatter into the parking lot. I didn't see my family anywhere. Maybe they had parked around the corner. Maybe they'd already left. It didn't matter. For the first time, I didn't chase after them. I walked to my car, the same Camry that had started all of this, and unlocked it. The seat was cold, the faint scent of soda and cheap perfume still clinging to the upholstery. My hands rested on the steering wheel, and I exhaled. 6 months probation, 1 year license suspension, restitution. Words that sounded small compared to the years of imbalance we'd all lived through. But it was something. It was acknowledgement, at least. They'd said I was destroying the family, that I was cruel, vindictive. But sitting there with the courthouse fading in the rearview mirror, I realized something I'd never dared to before. Maybe the family had already been broken long before today. Maybe all I'd done was stop pretending that their love was unconditional. I started the engine. The hum was steady and familiar, a sound that felt like home in a way my parents' voices no longer did. The windshield reflected my face, older, calmer, sharper. They walked away like I was a stranger, I thought. Maybe they were right, because I wasn't their obedient daughter anymore. I wasn't the quiet sister who kept patching up the holes in everyone else's life. I wasn't the dependable one they could take for granted. As I pulled out of the parking lot, raindrops began to scatter across the windshield. I turned on the wipers, watching the world blur into motion. With every block I drove, the courthouse grew smaller behind me until it was nothing but a faint gray shadow against the city skyline. Maybe they would never forgive me. Maybe they would tell their friends that I'd turned on them, that I was ungrateful, and maybe they'd even believe it. But for the first time, that didn't terrify me, because freedom, I realized, doesn't always look like joy. Sometimes it looks like loneliness. Clean, sharp, honest. I rolled down the window and let the rain touch my face, cool and steady. The city lights flickered in the wet streets ahead. They said I'd ruined everything. I whispered to myself. Maybe I did, but maybe what I ruined never should have existed the way it was. The traffic light ahead turned green, and I pressed the accelerator. The tires hissed against the rain-slicked asphalt, and I drove forward, leaving the courthouse and the version of myself that still begged for their approval far behind. You can't control me anymore, I thought. And this time, I knew it was true. A month passed after the sentencing, and life fell into a strange, quiet rhythm, one that felt both foreign and necessary. I hadn't heard from my parents since the day they walked out of the courtroom, and the silence between us was louder than any fight we'd ever had. There were no phone calls, no messages, no let's talk text that I half expected to appear at 2 a.m. Instead, the world just moved on. From the few updates that slipped through mutual relatives, I learned my parents had bought Elena a used Honda Civic, 10 years old, dented but still running. She needs a fresh start, my aunt had said over voicemail, her tone clipped with judgment. Of course she does, I thought. In their world, redemption was something you could buy, as long as you paid cash and never said the word sorry. I didn't respond. I didn't have it in me to keep explaining myself to people who'd already decided who the villain was. Instead, I started building a new, kind of quiet. I moved apartments across the city, closer to the foothills where the air felt a little clearer, and the neighbors didn't ask questions. I changed my phone number, blocked every contact that carried the Reyes last name except for Grandma Sophia. She was the only one who still called, her voice warm and steady, asking about work, about my plants, about whether I was eating enough. She never mentioned Elena again, and I loved her for that. The first few weeks alone were strange. I'd wake up expecting a message, some family emergency that would demand I drop everything and fix it. But none came, and slowly, that anxiety began to fade into something else. Peace. I filled the silence with small rituals. Making coffee before dawn. Opening the curtains to let sunlight flood the apartment. Taking long walks after work. The quiet no longer felt empty. It felt earned. One morning, I stepped outside with my coffee and looked down at the parking lot from my balcony. There was my Camry, clean, shining in the morning light, still parked in the same space I'd claimed since moving in. For months, that car had been the symbol of everything broken in me. Anger, betrayal, loss. But now it looked different. It wasn't just a reminder of what had been taken. It was proof of what I'd taken back. I walked down to the lot and ran my hand along the hood, the metal warm under the sun. I detailed it myself 2 weeks earlier. Vacuumed every crumb, wiped every smudge, filled the tank, replaced the floor mats. It looked brand new again, except for a tiny scuff near the handle, one I decided not to fix. A reminder. Then I opened the driver's side door and locked in the steering wheel club I'd ordered online the night before. The bright yellow bar stretched across the wheel like a quiet declaration. Not protection from thieves, I thought, tightening the bar, but a promise to myself. No one touches what's mine without permission ever again. Standing there in the early morning light, the city still half asleep, I realized how different the word mine felt now. It wasn't about ownership. It was about boundaries, about choosing what I allowed in and what I didn't. Some nights, I'd still lie awake wondering if Elena hated me, or if she'd learned anything from what happened. I wondered if my parents sat around the dinner table pretending I didn't exist, or if they told themselves some comfortable story where they were the victims of my cruelty. Maybe both. But the difference now was simple. It wasn't my burden anymore. I'd carried that weight my entire life. The invisible responsibility to make everyone else comfortable, even at my own expense. To be the calm one, the forgiving one, the daughter who never caused trouble. That version of me had served them well. But she was gone now. In her place was someone quieter, but stronger. Someone who didn't apologize for wanting respect. Someone who understood that peace doesn't always mean reconciliation. It sometimes means walking away and refusing to look back. Weeks turned into months. I started saying yes to things again. After-work dinners, weekend hikes, art classes I used to think I didn't have time for. People began to know me not as Elena's sister or the good daughter, but as Natalie, the woman who loved coding and black coffee and slow Sunday mornings. And yet, every time I walked to my car, that steering wheel lock caught the sunlight like a small badge of defiance. It reminded me of the girl I used to be, the one who'd scrubbed mud off a broken bike in the rain, who'd stayed quiet while others took and took. Not anymore. As I drove to work one morning, the radio playing softly, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked steady, unhurried. There were faint lines at the corners of my eyes now, not from age, but from all the years I'd spent holding myself together. I smiled just a little. The road ahead stretched wide and open, the kind of freedom that doesn't come from escape, but from finally standing still and realizing no one owns your direction but you. And when I parked that evening, I glanced back at my car before locking it, feeling that same steady, calm wash over me. They call me selfish, I thought. But maybe for the first time, I was just being fair to myself. The steering wheel glinted under the streetlight as I walked away. And in that moment, I didn't feel anger or regret, just clarity. Because the truth was simple, and it had taken me 30 years to learn it. What's mine isn't just what I earn, it's what I protect. 6 months later, the air in Denver had softened. The snow had melted into slow streams, the trees outside my apartment bursting with green. Life had started to settle into something that almost resembled peace. It was around that time that I joined a small local support group called Boundaries and Healing. It met every Thursday night in the basement of a community center. A circle of mismatched chairs, warm tea, and people who carried quiet scars just like mine. Some had parents who never listened. Others had siblings who never apologized. We were all there for the same reason, to learn how to stop bleeding for people who kept cutting us. The first time I spoke, my voice shook. I told them about the car, about the betrayal, about how I'd spent years being the strong one. The one who never said no, because family first was the rule written into my bones. I told them about Elena, about my parents' silence, about the courtroom. And as I spoke, I expected judgment. But when I looked up, all I saw were wet eyes and nodding heads. A woman across from me whispered, "That's not selfish. That's survival." And in that moment, something inside me cracked, not from pain, but from release. Every week after that, I came back. We talked about boundaries, guilt, forgiveness that didn't require reunion. I learned that walking away doesn't make you cruel. It means you've stopped pretending broken things can hold weight. One evening, our group leader asked, "What's the hardest truth you've learned since setting your boundaries?" I thought for a long moment, tracing the rim of my teacup, that I didn't lose my family. I finally said, "I just lost the people who never respected me enough to be part of it." No one spoke for a while. Then slowly, everyone began to nod again. That night, when I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in years. I started doing more things alone, not out of loneliness, but because I wanted to. I took long drives through the mountains on weekends, sometimes with no destination in mind. The first time I drove through Independence Pass alone, I rolled down all the windows and let the cold wind whip through my hair. The road curved along cliffs and valleys, the horizon stretching endlessly ahead. There was no one in the passenger seat to fill the silence, but somehow it didn't feel empty. It felt honest. I stopped measuring my worth by what I gave. I started measuring it by what I kept. My peace, my time, my sense of self. One Sunday evening, I drove up to Lookout Mountain just before sunset. The road wound higher and higher until the city below was nothing but a sea of golden light. I parked near the edge, stepped out, and leaned against the hood of my car. The same car that had once symbolized everything broken between us now sat quietly beneath me, steady and loyal. Below, Denver glimmered like a constellation come to life. Tiny dots of light, flickering across the valley, each one a story, a home, a beginning. I breathed in the crisp mountain air and realized I'd finally found mine. For a long time, I just stood there, no tears, no bitterness, no longing, just a quiet gratitude for the woman I had become and for the lesson that had cost me so much to learn. The road had been long, but it had led me here, to freedom, to stillness, to myself. A year later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, just a neat, familiar handwriting on the front. From Elena. I carried it inside, sat at my kitchen table, and stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a short handwritten note. "Dear Natalie, I'm in therapy now. I understand that help doesn't mean taking. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. This isn't to ask for your forgiveness, but to let you know that I'm trying to become a better person. Elena." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in the top drawer of my desk. I didn't cry. I didn't write back. I didn't need to, because the letter wasn't really about forgiveness. It was about acknowledgement, and sometimes that's enough. That night, I sat by the window, watching the lights of the city flicker below, the same view I'd fallen in love with months earlier. My reflection looked different now. Still me, but calmer, softer, steadier. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the silence, the courtroom, the long drives, the healing, and realized something profound. They say blood is thicker than water, but I've learned that respect is thicker than relation. A car, a boundary, a single act of self-respect. That's all it took to rewrite the story I'd been living my whole life. Because the people who truly love you don't take from you. They protect what you've worked hard for. And as I reached over and locked my steering wheel for the night, the metal bar gleaming faintly under the streetlight, I smiled. Sometimes the hardest battles we face aren't with strangers, but with the people we love most. Family can teach us compassion, but it can also teach us where our boundaries end. My story reminds us that love without respect is just control wrapped in sentiment. It's easy to confuse sacrifice with loyalty, to believe that saying no makes us cruel. But true love, real healthy love, never demands that we abandon ourselves to keep others comfortable. Setting boundaries isn't about punishment. It's about protection. It's the moment you stop proving your worth and start honoring it. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconnection. It sometimes means choosing peace over proximity. If you've ever been made to feel guilty for standing up for yourself, remember this. People who truly value you will never take from you what you've worked hard to build. They will support your independence, not resent it. Because at the end of the day, family isn't defined by shared blood. It's defined by shared respect. And the most important relationship you'll ever protect is the one you have with yourself. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own self-respect? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.